Hi everyone. I wanted to make a couple of observations about the Orlando shooting at the Pulse nightclub the other night. Almost immediately upon the news of that, breaking in the morning here in Canada, my Facebook feed became a gun debate. And I'm sure similarly Twitter and Google Plus and YouTube, etc., etc. And to me, this isn't a gun debate. Now, I will say right off the bat, I'm not a gun guy. I think in some ways postured in between the two typical opponents in the gun debate. I've never owned a gun. I don't have a gun. I'm 48. I probably won't get a gun unless things get really nasty. But I do have some moral issues with saying that a person can't own a certain thing. But I'm not wedded to that. So I'm not a pro-gun guy. I'm not an anti-gun guy. And I'm not saying that there can't be a gun debate surrounding terrorist acts. What I noticed on my Facebook feed was especially all of the gun restriction type advocates were not mentioning ideology or hate or anything about even homophobia. None of that was mentioned. Ideology was not mentioned at all. I'm not sure that the guns were particularly hateful or homophobic. I think something has to drive someone to the point of a homicidal homophobia. And like I said, I think a gun discussion could be had, but that's not what was happening on my Facebook feed amongst people that I know. I attempted to interject a little bit of ideology into the discussion, and the questions I got back were, which ideology? And that's a little bit difficult to take. I also noticed a few people have been quoting a cleric, I guess, who came to speak in Orlando in April of 2016. Now, some have suggested that Omar Mateen, the killer in the Orlando shootings, attended the talk given by Dr. Farouk Sekaleshfar. I'm probably butchering that, but I don't much care. Now, I doubt he actually attended that discussion, but I did watch the videotape of a talk given by Dr. Sekaleshfar at the University of Michigan in 2013 about Islam and homosexuality. And it's where most of the excerpts are taken from, where people have quoted him as saying that the compassionate thing to do with homosexuals is to kill them, and you should kill them quickly. And several things are being taken a little bit out of context, or at least his statements are absent some important context, I think. I say this, I think that these things are important to clarify for the sake of clarity, not necessarily for any practical reasons. I don't think it really actually impacts all that much the kind of ideology promoted by this Dr. Sekaleshfar. But in the video at the University of Michigan, he talks at great length about all the lead up to the actual punishment, the punishment being death. And that is supposed to be done compassionately, apparently. And so one of the things he stresses multiple times is that these punishments are only to be meted out in countries where people have expressed a desire to be ruled by Islam as a rule of law. The other thing that he stresses in there is that these punishments, and while admittedly harsh, can't be viewed absent the mechanism designed around proving that a person has committed these acts, these homosexual acts. There's a lot of apologetics going on if you watch this video. He seems to be keenly aware of how he's going to be viewed for saying that homosexuals should be killed, and killed quickly. You want to kill them as soon as possible so they don't continue in their sinful ways. That this is a soul preservation mechanism. But in terms of someone being taken to task on these accusations of homosexuality, there's a lot of apologetics around, it's very unlikely that a person would ever get to the point where they would be actually found guilty of being a homosexual, because one of the mechanisms would be that they would have to self-report, they would have to turn themselves in 4 times before the governing body would take it seriously. And he gives a little bit of a play acting there where he pretends to be the guy coming in and admitting, and the police officer or official that would be taking his admission. And at the first time he says, you might have been mistaken, just go about your way. And after the second and third time he says, maybe this person could be mentally ill, and self-reporting, and this happens, of course. But the fourth time, and he even says, mental illness gets you off. You can't be charged with homosexuality under Islam if you're mentally ill. You're off scot-free then. So somehow the third time we would be concerned about someone's state of mental health, but not the fourth. The fourth, then you are guilty. And the other way would be to be caught in a public display of the homosexual act, specifically that being anal penetration, penile penetration of a man to a man by 4 people. And those would be the witnesses or the complainants or the accusers or whatever. And so he's saying, based on this, he's sort of painting the picture that it's pretty unlikely that someone is going to be convicted of a homosexual act and therefore be deemed worthy of the punishment of very swift death, so that they don't keep sinning. Now, he also stresses in there that a person could repent on their own, and then they would be minus all of these things. Not once they're accused, but if a person was conducting these affairs within the confines of their own home and no one else knew about it, that's between them and Allah, and he could repent for that directly to Allah. And as I said, I think it's important to note those things for clarity, but I don't think it impacts all that much what people do with that kind of information. Obviously, Omar Mateen did something different than what this guy is suggesting, because, of course, the United States of America is not a country that has submitted itself to the rule of law of under Islam. The other thing I wanted to mention, too, getting back to the gun debate thing just a little bit. Obviously, again, I don't think this is a gun issue. It's turned into one, and that's what these things always do. Partially, I think, because a lot of people have pre-existing agenda. Obviously, the gun lobby does, and the anti-gun lobby definitely has an agenda. But I had a thought, and I thought, how humorous must it be for jihadists and anyone who would subscribe to that hateful ideology that they can have one of their henchmen come in and kill 49 people and injure another 50 plus, and that the common discourse amongst the people in that very country is of disarming themselves, disarming honest citizens, disarming peaceful, law-abiding citizens. Because those guys are going to get the guns, right? And not to mention, nobody seems to be willing to turn attention to their own government, who has supplied more bad guys with guns in history than probably any other single gun supplier. But that aside, I just thought, how humorous must it be for those people to see that level of discord, that level of disconnect? And that was brought home to me a little bit further by a post that someone reposted on my Facebook feed from a woman in Paris. And the woman in Paris was talking about how the future is not going to look kindly back at certain people and their hate, their lack of compassion, and the way that they conducted themselves, and that in the future maybe someone's great grandchild or grandchild will ask, what did you do back in the day? And that people might be so embarrassed that they might even lie about the way they conducted themselves today. And ironically, this woman from France wasn't referring to Omar Mateen. She was referring to people who might question the ideology that Omar Mateen believed in. And I'm not talking necessarily about Islam as a fits-all, one umbrella. I'm talking about the non-reformed aspects of Islam that does exist in many pockets of this world. And none of the liberal left-type people on my Facebook feed were willing to even talk about ideology. And I understand why. And I think there is some genuine sentiment there when it comes to not wishing to stoke anti-Muslim sentiment. I understand that. Completely understand that. The not all sentiment, however, has a tendency to stifle honest discussion. And in the end, what I think it does is that actually stokes the fires of anti-Muslim sentiment. I think it's dangerous to skirt around the issue. The issue is hateful ideology, and no one seems to want to talk about the hateful ideology that would take someone to the point where they would commit such a heinous act. It's hard to fathom. It's hard to fathom for what I consider to be a rational person to imagine inflicting that on my fellow human beings. Peace to you all, and peace to the people in Florida who were impacted by this terrible tragedy. Massacre. Sorry. Words are important. Thanks for watching.